Hello. Hi, Linda. Welcome to the Relationship Labs podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Herschel. It's a pleasure to join you all, and I'm excited.
Great. Thank you so much for pronouncing my name correctly. A lot of people are confused with my full name. That's why I put like Ash for like a
Uh-huh.
short form. But thanks so much for remembering that. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Great. So, Linda, do you have a favorite quote, something that inspires or motivates you, you would like to share with our audience?
Yes, one of my favorite quotes is by Maya Angelou, and she says, "Everything in the universe moves, everything dances." And I think
Hmm.
that is the thing that kind of drives me in life is to see the world as a dance.
Interesting. Everything moves, everything dances. I like it. It is kind of like a deep thought for your brain to it's kind of food for your brain to think about,
hmm
right?
hmm
So that's great. So Linda, you are a relationship expert.
Yes.
All of our listeners are excited to have you on the show. Uh, wh- you know that we discuss about modern relationship issues
Yes.
which were not even considered problems or issues a generation before, or let's say 20, 25 years before, because the paradigm of the whole human lifestyle has changed. We
hmm
never had internet. Now we have internet. We never had AI. Now we have AI. We never had porn. Now we have porn. Well, I think we had porn, but in a different
In a different
level,
form.
in a different form. Uh, the way it affects our lives now has changed dramatically.
Yes.
The influences the technology having on our children, the influences technology has on ourself, adults, and our old senior citizens, has tremendous control. The propaganda, the way the data mining companies are affecting our mindset, is everywhere around us. And
hmm
I think it's very difficult for an individual to kind of control their own life based on the data and the technology they're surrounded by. And that's why we have these very basic but modern issues rising in our society nowadays.
Absolutely.
And one of the things which I realized recently is I was talking with my partner, and she was saying that right now the propaganda and the narrative in the market is people on social media or even in media, like news channels, they're focusing quite negatively on women's image. They're
hmm
trying to portray like now women can make money, they are independent, and that's why all this negative energies flowing into the media, saying like, motherhood is something very precious, or you should not just be doing, job, you should also be thinking about the family and things like that. But then I remember I am old. I am almost 40 years old. And I remember the time 10 years back when
hmm
the same kind of propaganda was produced by these media company, by these, people who control our sentiments about men. They were doing
hmm
exactly same thing about men in the media. Something has changed.
hmm
What is that something? What has changed?
It's interesting that you said that, and thank you for kind of framing kind of the modern paradigm. And I think what we're experiencing is more than just a battle of the sexes. I think we're seeing in real time a battle between the nature of things versus culture and environment.
Mm.
And so, um, I like to think of it if your viewers and your listeners can imagine the symbol of yin and yang, and that's kind of
Mm.
what we talk about in tango, is that we usually think about the masculine energy and the feminine energy, and we talk exclusively about those two elements.
Mm.
However, what we forget is that within yin, there is a yang circle, and
Circle.
within yang, there is a yin circle. And what
Mm.
happens is, in the absence of both of those working in harmony, the yang element will arise in the yin when it's appropriate, and the
Mm.
yin will arise in the yang when it's appropriate. Said another
Mm.
way, is a feminine energy or a woman has within her yang or masculine elements that will arise when it's appropriate or the environment requires that.
Mm,
Similarly, with yang in a masculine or a man, when the environment allows, the yin will arise. And I think that is what we're seeing. We just have forgotten that that's how nature and that's how the energies within the cosmos work. So
mm,
when people say, there's this kind of negative, if you will, paradigm associated with masculine energies arising in women, we forget that that's a very natural thing, that that's
mm,
going to arise, that every yin has yang. And for example, the what's associated with yin, yang is provision.
mm,
And when a woman or yin does not have provision in from an external element, she will provide it internally. So that's a very
mm,
natural thing. And we've forgotten how nature works. And then when we see it at work, we think it's something abnormal when it's
mm,
actually not. It's something that's very natural.
mm. Interesting. That is a very interesting perspective. And I've never seen yin yang sign in this perspective before. I always
Mm-hmm.
thought that it's like half and half, but now you have opened up a different sort
Mm-hmm.
of like a thought process in my brain, because yes, every yin has yang in it and every yang has yin in it, because without it the whole yin yang concept is not complete.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Interesting, very interesting. So going deeper on the same topic then,
Mm-hmm.
I see quite a lot of fuzz in Western countries, especially in English speaking countries like UK, Ireland, US, some of the parts of South America. There's a kind of a feeling i- in our regular environment where Western men
Mm-hmm.
fleeing to Eastern Asia, getting married there, and coming
Mm-hmm.
back.
Yes.
That wasn't the case 20 years back. I think maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe 30 years back that wasn't the case, but it is now. There's a
Mm-hmm.
percentage of men doing that. Um, when it comes to marriages in our country, English
Mm-hmm.
speaking Western developed countries, do you think is marriage still relevant in today's society with shifting values and cohabitation becoming more common? The necessity of marriage is often questioned. What's your
Mm-hmm.
view on it?
I think it's still valid, appropriate, and it is just an external picturing of something that's natural. So, I mean, number one, pairing, coupling, procreating is a part of our biology. It's who we are. And
Mm,
so, what marriage or unions provide is a stable structure for the raising and development of children to become functioning members of society or the group or the community.
mm,
Stability is extremely important for a woman to have a healthy pregnancy, to have healthy child rearing space. And so marriage provides the emotional, physical, spiritual, financial support for her
mm.
pregnancy, for her preparation for her
Pregnancy, yep.
pregnancy, and then for the nursing and nurturing of the child until it becomes of age. So it's a social construct that is an outpicturing of a biological need.
Mm,
When women do not feel safe, they don't have the nourishment, if she doesn't have the right food, if she's running from predators, if it's war torn, if it's famine, she's not going to give birth to healthy, thriving babies and children, and therefore you see a decline in society. So I don't
mm,
think, so I think sometimes we get caught up in the picture as opposed to the undercurrent that is being asked of. The reason that that's
mm,
important because in Western society, women are saying very verbally and very adamantly that they do not feel safe in
mm,
modern relationships. They do not feel a safe enough environment to be vulnerable, to be in relationship, to have an environment where they can have children and be healthy and provided for and focus on that and still feel safe.
mm,
And so, because they do not feel safe, they are taking on those responsibilities themselves to be safe, to provide for themselves, to give protection, to express love and all of those things. The challenge is that there's a lack of listening because we don't value the feminine energy in Western culture. We don't value the feminine contribution to culture at the same level that we do in other cultures. And so, unfortunately, rather than kind of having that honest conversation, you see gentlemen, I think, going to cultures where the yin is honored and they're looking for mates, not realizing that what they're attracted to is not necessarily the woman themselves, but those women are in environments where they feel safer,
Safer.
they
Yeah.
feel more provided for. There's a cultural construct where, they feel fed, they feel like, they can have children.
Protected. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. And that there's a support network for them through motherhood and childbearing and whatever. However, if you look at birth rates and fertility rates around the world, they're in great decline globally. And it's in large part, because women around the world are saying, we're not safe. We're not feeling valued. Our contribution is not being valued. And so therefore, we're not having these children and we're not having these children because it's not safe. And we don't know if we have these children, we're going to be abandoned, et cetera, et cetera. And so, there's a parallel there that even governments are watching. I hope that kind of gives you the context.
Indeed, indeed. And that reminds me, because I come from a culture where we worship women for 9 days straight. We don't eat meat, we don't eat almost anything for 9 days, just water and some food made of boiled water for 9 days. Every night we dance around fire because I come from the indigenous part of the country, and then we celebrate it that the power of woman has blessed us, given us the prosperity, not just financially, but physically, mentally, all this kind of thing. And then we kind of like at the end of the ninth day, we kind of pray and say that please be with us for the rest of the year. And then we do the same thing next year. Not saying that worshiping a idol of woman is necessary, but I see your point here. I see that the affection toward feminine energy in Western countries is reduced, maybe because of the way society has treated the other side of the spectrum, or maybe it's dependent upon hundreds of other elements of how we are treated, right? Question from the previous question. We interviewed an expert about a relationship on our show. Her name was Eri. She kind of related feminine and masculine energy with safety, as you did, and freedom. So males are more intended towards the freedom, where they get the freedom, and females are more intended towards the relationship where they're feeling more safe, more secure. That's how we were talking about the two sides of the story. I think safety is a major concern, as you mentioned. How do you feel about this argument? I was listening to a conversation of an expert online with a podcast interviewer, where the interviewer asked about men used to go to wars, they used to fight in the war, they used to lose their legs, hands, and they used to come back to their families. And the argument from the other side, the lady expert, was always they used to get in return a wife and children. So, do you think in the modern world where men and women both are working, both are earning, both are supporting the household, is it fair to say that from this relationship, man gets a wife and a children? What does a woman gets?
That's an interesting thing. I mean, it depends on what culture, number one, because in some cultures, it wasn't just because you were a man, you got a wife and children. You had to, depending on the culture around the world, you had to demonstrate the ability to care and provide for
Yeah.
that woman and child, to protect them, whether it be some sort of financial demonstration, some sort of gift to the parent, to the family. And also in previous generations, there was extensive involvement of the father in kind of the care and protection of the child, especially the daughter, and
Mm.
then of course in her, mating prospects. I do want to back up a little bit, if it's okay with you,
Sure.
back to that, to safety and freedom, if I may, and then
Hmm.
we can talk about the other element. The interesting thing about safety and freedom, that is one element and layer of it, that the feminine values safety and, the man values freedom. I would say it's more a masculine and feminine thing, because if either, have you ever seen a little girl? A little girl that's feeling protected and safe, she is just so free and running around in her little dress and singing songs without a care in the world. And the
Mm.
reason why a little girl can move like that is either because she has men in her space, like a father or uncle or father figure, that makes her feel safe, or the cultural environment makes her feel safe. And
Mm.
with her safety, her freedom emerges. She only takes on safety for herself when it's not already either supported through another male person or in the environment usually. So I wouldn't say it's just the safety versus freedom. Young ladies, feminine energy is free. That's what creativity is. It's free, it's loving, it's expressive. But when the safety isn't there, then that gets squashed. So I don't think it's quite as clear cut. That's just
Mm.
an example. But then the whole element of what the prize is, and I think that's something that we're seeing in modern culture, at least I hear in the male conversation, is that, they feel entitled, if you will. That's the word that I'm hearing, that I should get a wife and a child and a family just because I'm a man, absent my ability to protect, absent my ability to provide, absent my ability to be a contributing leader in the community and therefore in the household.
So just
Um,
to let you know, this was the argument made by the lady on the
uh-huh.
call.
Yes,
She said that the man gets a wife and children. The interviewer didn't say that. So
exactly.
it's a perception of a lady in the conversation
Uh-huh.
who is a relationship expert, that being in a marriage or a relationship,
Hmm.
it's the wife and the children which is the prize for the man.
Yes, and that's why I say
But
only in certain cultures. That's not necessarily in every culture. I
yeah.
agree that in some cultures that's kind of the construct, but I'm
Mm.
pushing back a little bit because many of the cultures that I've studied through dance and music and art, the man
Mm.
has to have some sort of provision. He has to be able to. He can't just get one just because he shows up.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I appreciate that. Yes, she has captured some of that. I'm just adding
Mm.
another layer, and this
Mm.
is important because it's a part of what young ladies, even in modern culture, are saying.
Mm.
They're saying it's not that young ladies don't want to have family, don't want marriage and things like that. It's just they don't feel like it's any longer safe, or, and to your question or your point, if it does not provide value or a sense of feeling valued, then young ladies don't want to do it anymore.
Mm.
So
So
it's not,
what,
go ahead.
so let's say, for example, if we consider it for a moment that that's the price for men, what is the price for women in a relationship? I don't
Um,
see
sh-
anything. I see that marriage is the worst decision a woman can make. I mean, there's nothing for her to go into a married relationship, right? She doesn't want a husband. She doesn't want kids because obviously having kids ruins the career pathway in modern world. I'm not talking
Mhm.
about, world in 10
Absolutely.
years back. That could hinder her career because if you're
Hmm.
taking off from the work, it might be difficult to go back to the work again.
Workforce.
uh, Lots of hormonal changes that could change your mental stability. So why to have kids? It's a bad deal overall, right?
Yes, and when you're looking at it from an external standpoint, it absolutely is, and I think that's where a lot of young ladies of all ages are now.
Mm.
However, I think there is a internal thing that some women still want to nourish. They want to bring life into the world. They want to have a family. They want to pour into the care of a child. But the caveat is if. the structure and environment is there for her to do that successfully. Because if she's going to sacrifice all of these things of the world, she's looking for assurances and reassurances that if I take this path, you're not going to pull the rug out from under me, whether
Mm,
as my mate or as a society. And that's
mm,
important. If the mate is going to pull the rug out from underneath her, society has to have her back. If
mm,
society doesn't have her back, then she's like, no, I'm not signing up for this. No, ma'am, no, sir. And that's why
mm.
declining birth rates are there. Because
Yeah.
once again, we have all these single mothers, and society now is shaming them.
Mm,
And so now younger ladies are like, wait a minute, wait 1 minute now. I didn't get pregnant by myself. And so if he's not going to have my back and my community's not going to have my back, then why would I go down this path? And you are correct. That's where a lot of women are nowadays.
indeed. And then I've heard this argument around like you cannot get pregnant until and unless you trust that man, right? I mean, obviously, man cannot, you know, reproduce because the man needs a consent of a woman to reproduce.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Usually, yes.
that's like it's a rule of biology,
Exactly.
I guess, right?
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to female, I think in the modern world, there is a kind of possibility where you can reproduce without a male's engagement. You can go to the banks, get
Mm-hmm.
pregnant, and then have the motherhood. I think my perspective is more towards around we never had marriage as a concept in society. If you go back before religion was introduced to
Mm-hmm.
humanity,
Mm-hmm.
religion was introduced to humanity first. And then people who are sitting on top of this religion created this concept of marriage.
Mm-hmm.
In Islam, is in Christianity, in Hinduism, in all these religions, they created this concept of marriage. That's when the monogamy came along, right? Before that, it was all about if this man can protect me, provide for me, I will go and have children with this man because that was the fundamental requirement of a female to reproduce. But then these weak men who created religions created this concept of marriage
Mm-hmm.
where if you are weak, okay, how can we create an environment for you that you can also have a wife? Because weak men used to have no partners in those old times, right? And that's why they came up with. But now I feel in 2025 we are going back to where we started. I had a guest on the show who
Mm-hmm.
had a daughter living in Canada, a son living in California. They're both in a relationship with their partners, having kids, but not married. They're
Mm-hmm.
in their mid 40s. I asked the question generally to him, and he said it's very, very normal in Western countries now to not have a marriage and live together and raise a family together.
Yes, and the challenge is the adults have a perspective of I'm going to start with this point. Pers- when you're an adult, you can always see things through your lens. Children don't see things through an adult lens.
Mm,
So all these parents and all of these adults are out here saying, "Oh, wedlock marriage, that's not necessary. That construct of safety and stability, I don't need that." The dad is like, "I don't need that." The mom is like, "I don't need that." But the children are not having that experience.
mm,
And because the children cannot articulate with the vocabulary of an adult, adults think that children are doing just fine when they're not. Okay?
mm,
Because marriage, once again, is a cultural construct that is coming out of a biological, natural kind of construct. The laws of man come out of the laws of nature in some way,
mm,
at least in its first iteration. So
mm,
marriage is just saying that if you are going to create, since it's going to take a minimum of 12 to 13 years, up to 18 years for this offspring to be functioning on its own, both the father and the mother and the community need to provide support, protection, and safety and whatever is needed for that offspring until they can care for themselves. This is important because the father is might thinking like, oh, it's good that I'm over here. But a
Mm.
child learns how to behave in culture and in nature by watching the mother and the father and how
Exactly.
they interact. So they
Mm.
learn about feminine energy in women from the mother, masculine energy in the father from the father. But even more importantly, they watch about how relationships should work,
Mm.
both platonic and sexually, by watching them engage on a daily basis. Because children
Mm.
mimic, they watch, they don't have a conversation, they watch, they observe, they internalize, and then they mimic. And so I think, yeah, we can say that everything is okay, but if you look at kind of the problems and issues amongst our young people today, it's clearly not.
It is clearly not. I couldn't agree more with you. And thanks for that, Linda. Because I think so. Even the Bureau of Justice Statistics survey of state prison inmates, they produce a report where they declare that 43% of prisoners in US, I'm not talking about other undeveloped country, developed countries, 43% of the prisoners had a single parent when
Mm-hmm.
they were growing up. And third, staggering 39% out of that 41%, 43% had a single mother, and remaining 4% had a single father, which to me is a foreign concept. I was grown up in a society where I lived with my dad until I went to college. He never even had an argument with my mom in front of me and my brother. What he used to do is, whenever they used to have arguments, they used to send us in our rooms, and then they used to go in the garden to have the argument. This is
Mm-hmm.
a man I'm talking about who used to manage more than 400 people in his office, come back to home with all this stress in his brain, right? He
Mm-hmm.
never smoked. He smoked for a couple of years when he had this stress. He never smoked in front of us. We never knew that he smoked. Now we are adults. He shared his stories. My mother used to wake up at 3:30 a.m. to make tea. In India, we make tea with milk. We boil it together
Uh-huh.
to give a boost in the morning. And she used to be there on our study table from 4 a.m. until 6 a.m. until we both brothers study. Then she used to make us breakfast, lunch, pack us our bags, and then she used to go to the school to teach. So
Mm-hmm.
it was a difficult life. But what she got out of this life? She got two very successful children who
Mm-hmm.
are living their life successfully in different parts of the world at a very good level. Plus, these are the two kids she raised, she's proud of, because
Mm-hmm.
every single time we call our mother every day, almost every week, we still call her with respect. We still
Exactly.
have these things in our brain. Whenever we speak with our father once in a month or twice in a month, we still have this respect for him to take advice. Even though if he doesn't understand the current technology paradigm, we take his input whenever we are making crucial decisions in our life. So that's that kind of culture we were raised in,
Mm-hmm.
compared to the people I am meeting nowadays who are frustrated with themselves, looking at the porn because they don't have a partner, and having these kind of issues in their life. I have another question which is kind of scratches a little bit on relationships, which obviously you can give us more inputs on. Is sex without love acceptable in a committed relationship?
Um, well, culturally, we have made it acceptable.
Hmm.
Um, Biologically, emotionally, and spiritually, I would say less so.
Hmm.
Number one, because we're a whole being.
Hmm.
And no, that's the first thing. So, when you show up, your body doesn't just show up. The rest of you shows up. Now, how you handle the rest of you
Hmm.
when you're in that situation, um, that's a whole different element. But especially for the feminine energy,
Hmm.
even though culturally we have made it acceptable, and I have
Hmm.
no bones about that. Remember, we talked about the importance of feminine energy being safe from a biological
Yeah.
standpoint.
Yeah.
Because the woman is the receiver in an intimate relationship, and she's putting herself in a vulnerable position just as if she was in childbirth, those other elements become extremely important. Now we've made it so that it doesn't have to be that, and we can just make it pleasure and all these other things. But we also don't have those other cultural elements like being in season, working, having the harvest, and mating within season. So we don't have that here. In other cultures, you have to mate within season. You don't just mate willy nilly. You mate in the harvest times and things like that. So I think even today you're seeing that, after a while, ladies are like, why am I doing this? Something within me doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel good. I feel like an object, because when you have sex without an emotional, spiritual, or mental attachment, you really are an object. You've divorced the other elements of you to engage in this act, but you see women complaining about being objectified, and that's why. The spiritual element can be understated. The emotional element can be understated because, once again, cultures and society, even though they don't value the feminine financially, the feminine energy is the reason, respectfully, that society exists long term. Because if women don't have children, societies collapse.
How is going to? Yeah, exactly my point. Yeah.
So the entire economic structure is dependent upon her being successful, thriving, and not only just having children, but having successful, healthy children that want to operate within the construct of community. Because you can have mavericks that are out here killing and everything else, but most cultures and most societies don't want that. They want people that want to get along, work together, and things like that. So if you don't take care of that, all of this will cease to exist eventually.
Who should take care of that?
I mean, it requires both parts. It requires both parts. And that's why I said women are often willing to make the sacrifices for that if they are valued and you consider the value of what they bring beyond financial contribution. However, when you don't value them and they're not valued for their contribution, they're like, forget all that. I'm just gonna make this money and I'm out. I'm gonna take care of me and then I'm out. Y'all fend for yourselves.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you, because in the Eastern countries, it's other way around, right? Okay, let me share some stats with you. In Japan, people have quite a lot of senior citizens. So now they're trying to promote in the country to younger people to have more kids. They're giving them tax rebates. They have initiated the tax rebates to the level where if you are a single person earning yourself, let's say, for example, you pay 50% tax. If you are married, you pay 49%, both of you, because it's a positive step towards, reproduction. If you have one child, both of you pay less than 24%. If you have second child, both of you pay nothing. And you get money from government to support your child. This is how, I mean, I'm making up these numbers, but you can go online and search.
I've seen it.
And this, you will see this kind of initiations from the government side. Now, let's talk about Scandinavian countries. Scandinavian countries is the best example in the world to provide equality. What they said, every single job you advertise, whether it is a person who is doing grid installation for electricity wire, or a construction worker, or a CEO, you have to give equal opportunity to every single person. After 10 years, what happened? All the women are still in the nurturing jobs, doctors, nurses, IT jobs where you don't need physical power, and all the men are still in the similar kind of job, and there's not a much differences in the job profiles yet, even though government is pushing. And I think Scandinavian country is the best place to feel the equality when it comes to male and female. Approximately 9.8 million single parents were found in 2023 alone in USA. out of which
Mhm.
7.3 million were single mothers and 2.5 was single fathers.
Mhm.
That tells me that as humans,
Mhm.
we actually are not good at all figuring out whom we should reproduce with, right? Because what is the population of US?
Oh, 330 million, give
330.
or take.
let's
Give or
let's
take.
say if we reduce half of it, they're young people, so let's say
Mhm.
150 million, out of which we say people between 20 to 50 is, I don't know, 50 million. Out of 50 million, if
Mhm.
9.3 million, 9.8 million people turn out to be single parents, that's not a good percentage, is it?
No, and I'm going to say something that's probably unpopular.
Hmm.
Um, the masculine, and this is a part of why you're seeing the imbalance in the masculine and feminine energy. One of the
Hmm.
elements of masculinity is not just leadership with quotation, air quotations, it's responsibility.
Hmm.
That's a core tenet of the masculine energy is to
Hmm.
be responsible. You can't have nurturing without protection and
Hmm.
safety and
Can't.
vulnerability.
Hmm.
Okay. And the counter to that protection is to provide that as long as this exists.
Hmm.
So if someone's willing to be vulnerable to you, then what you're saying is in exchange for that vulnerability or to honor that vulnerability, I'm going to honor it and keep it safe.
Hmm.
When you take away safety, you take away vulnerability. Okay.
Hmm.
Responsibility understands that. Leadership understands that.
When you say take away safety, you mean you let go the child. Well, you're gone from their life. You're not supporting them financially. You're not giving them your time. Is that what you mean when you
On all levels,
all
definitely. For
levels?
example, with the single, when you're talking about the single parent paradigm, that's a huge if you will, violation of contract, if you will,
Hmm.
because it requires two people to create the child.
Hmm.
When you create a child, that child is your responsibility.
Indeed, definitely
All
it
right.
is. Yeah.
So if you have a single mother, then that means you are not taking care of your responsibility because you don't just have a responsibility to the child, you have a responsibility to the mother. But
Hmm.
something as simple as feeding, the mother is literally creating food for the child with her body. So you can't provide for the child if you don't provide for the mother.
Hmm.
The
Indeed.
child gets their emotional security and stability from the mother in their early years. So you can't provide emotional stability for the child if you don't care for the mother. So the key thing is this whole, but in Western culture, we've tried to create this segmentation that a man can care for the child and not care for the mother who is the primary care provider for the child. I mean, it's ludicrous. It's
It is.
absolutely ludicrous. If she's not able to eat well, or if her body's filled with stress hormones from working, she can't give attention to the child. If the child is in daycare because she's trying to keep a roof over their heads, but the father is in a different place, once
My
again, she can't
my
provide for the child.
my
So, yeah.
heart breaks when I hear these kind of things. So
Yes.
sometimes I babysit for my brother's child. He goes to a school, and sometimes I go and pick it up. And they provided my picture, my details to the
Yes.
daycare, so they recognize me. I'm the uncle. I
Yes.
go and I talk to the people there, right? I
Mm-hmm.
have noticed it not once or twice, many times, that the same child is picked up by 3 days by the mother and three
Mm-hmm.
days by the father. Now imagine the flight the 4 year, 5 year old has to go through, that I have two homes to live in. So I cannot
Exactly.
see my father for 3 days, and I cannot see my mother for 3 days. That child has no idea how the society works. This
Mm-hmm.
is the society for him or her. That child has no understanding of what a good relationship looks like, because that child never experienced it. And I'm so, my heart cries when I see these small wonders made by God, that they cannot experience what we experienced in our
Mm-hmm.
childhood, the preciousness of a strong relationship, the
Absolutely.
safety, the environment.
Absolutely. And these children thrive in that. Not to say that children are not resilient, but they're not supposed to have to be resilient.
Hmm.
We're forcing them to be resilient. And, I was, a product of being forced to be resilient.
Mm.
However, I would say there's a lot of anxiousness in children when there's not a stability. Children strive and flourish in stability and routine and knowing where boundaries are. That doesn't mean that they won't test them, but they feel a sense of security and healthy. They feel very healthy when they know, okay, this is the routine. That's why moms and dads usually work so hard to give them that. They
Mm.
know where daddy is if they're scared at night, and the monster is under the bed. They know they can run to mommy and daddy and say, daddy,
Daddy and
come,
sleep with them.
daddy, come get the dragon. These kinds of things are extremely important. But
Yeah.
once again, children don't have the vocabulary to
Mm.
say to the father or to say to usually the mothers will see it. And that's why you see sometimes a clash between single moms and single dads is that the mother unfortunately sees the anxiety. They see the thing that the child is going through, and they try to communicate to the father. And unfortunately, at least in Western culture, the father often dismisses it. So you see the children act out in school because they don't know
Mm.
how to communicate their frustration and their anger, which is why many of these prisoners wind up in jail because they're angry, they're frustrated, and they don't have a safe place to express. And they're usually angry at a parent and they can't lash out at their parent, so they lash out at the world.
Mm. Mm. Indeed. So I think this conversation is going tremendously well. I do not want to end it, but we are limited with the
Yes,
time. So
time.
let me ask you a $1 million question, which I've been asked
Ooh,
in
million dollar
every
question.
single meetings I go for speaking gigs and everything. Let me give you an ideal situation. You are in your mid 30s, you're
Mm-hmm,
making top 1% salary or earning top 1% in your country. You're top
mm-hmm,
shelf. You're very good looking. You're very healthy. You go to the gym. You are a lady of dreams for millions.
mm-hmm,
You met a average looking person who makes almost similar money as you do,
mm-hmm,
responsible,
mm-hmm.
uh, keeps you safe, and everything. Should you marry this person?
If 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 the person's character and values are aligned and they have the long view of relationship outside of me,
Mm.
then that would be a candidate for marriage. A man, and this is from a woman who would be a wife and a mother. A
Mm.
man has to want to be a father and a husband, period.
Wow.
He
Wow.
has to
That's a
want
big
that,
statement. Yeah.
period.
Yeah.
Then the mate becomes a part of it. But if a man is not already interested and understand what it means to be a husband and a father before he meets his mate, then there's always going to be this problem. There's always going to be this out. There's always going to be something that could get in the way. But when he's
Mm.
committed to being when he's like, he goes into it and knows, I want to be a father and I'm going to be there for my family because that's once I commit, just
Mm.
like my wife and mother, she can't back out of being a mom.
Definitely.
Once she makes that commitment, that's a lifetime commitment. Like she
Mm.
can't back out of that agreement. So she
Yeah.
needs to have a mate who understands that when she goes into it, she is 100% in. Once those children are here, they are her responsibility for her life.
Mm.
She needs to have a mate that has an understanding of that before he ever meets her. And that
So
would
in a
be probably that.
so in a very simple words, if the man has values and characteristic and clarify to the woman that he wants to be a responsible husband and he wants to be a responsible father, that's the only, well, that's the characteristics you should be seeing to be a partner with somebody.
That's the foundation. Obviously, there are
Foundation.
other elements, but that's the foundation because
Foundation.
everything else will change. Money will change, looks will change, work will change, maybe physical location will change, family dynamics will change because parents pass away. But
Mm.
when that fundamental um, values and character is there, and then once you say the commitment is on top of that, the covenant is there, then it can weather everything else.
Got it. Now let me put you in a spot. Let me flip it. What
Okay?
should the man marries if the lady, so let's say we just
Mm-hmm.
flip it. The man is very good looking, go to the gym, earns the 1% in the country, stable, have multiple properties, have all the characteristic to become a husband and father.
Mhm.
Now he's looking for a woman who is good looking, can be with him for a lifelong because he is committed to become father and the husband. If he finds a woman,
Mhm.
what characteristic this woman should have in her persona so that the man can make a decision to marry or to settle down with this person?
Well, I think the first thing is that you see that's absent in a lot of Western cultural relationships, which is to look at value and character first.
Mm.
Unfortunately, in Western culture, men tend to look at the external appearance and then are surprised that 10 years later she doesn't look the same. Well,
Mm.
sir, 10 years later, nobody really looks the
Looks the
same.
same. Yeah.
So once again, it's still the same. It's still the same formula. Does this person have the values that I would like to see throughout my life? Does this person have the character that I will see throughout my life? Is that person willing to have the covenant? And am I willing to have the covenant with them
Mm.
regardless? Because that's the question that the man has to have, even though you say it's like freedom. It's like you have to be willing. Is this a woman that I'm going to commit to?
So
Then
if the woman doesn't want to be a mother or if the woman doesn't want to be a wife, that it's not a good date, you say.
then it's not a match. Yes, obviously,
Oh, it's
because
not a
if you're,
match. Yeah.
yeah, if you, because you want to have the same value and
Mm.
characteristics, and if you value having a wife and a marriage, and she doesn't, then I don't care how good she looks. I don't care if she looks like Salma Hayek. Like that's not
Mm.
the one for you. Like leave her on the
Mm.
shelf.
Interesting, interesting. And that is why I asked this question to my guests because you see, from the data released by Tinder,
Hmm.
9.6% women on this app goes
Hmm.
to only 1% men on the app. So that, let's say if there are 100 women and 100 men,
Hmm.
99 women will right swipe and like the one man on this
Hmm.
app, right? So the
Hmm.
remaining 99 man has no dates.
Hmm.
Can you imagine? This has been the data disclosed by Tinder. Imagine how many dating apps are there and how many much data they crunch every day. But the remaining ladies, they reject the remaining 99 men because they
Uh-huh.
don't want less good looking man or less alpha man. On the other hand, these 99 men in this 100 of bunch, they are willing to take risk and go on dates with everyone in this
Hmm.
100 stack of women, but obviously they don't get a date because of the perception the society has created in our mind that because we are perfect or we consider ourselves perfect, we want the other side also perfect based on looks. As you said, you were
Exactly.
spot on that the western society has plugged in these viruses in our brain that everything is about looks, but it's actually not.
Mm-mm. And we
Mm.
have the most unrealistic perspective like that, unfortunately. And I'll speak to this because this is something that I hear a lot even in my audiences and when
Mm.
I'm teaching and working with people, is that the lack of reality that people are working with now versus previous generations, the level of, some people would say delulu. The level of delusion is interesting because at least in my older audiences, they have a realistic perspective that beauty changes, bodies change. When you have
Mm.
babies, that changes. Like they have a realistic understanding that as you progress through life, you will change, death in the family, loss of job, sickness, illness. You
Mm.
understand that. So the person that you see in front of you is not going to be that picture that you see for the rest of your lives. It's just
Life,
like not going to
exactly.
happen.
Mm.
You have a 3 to 5 year shelf life on that. However,
Mm.
I think in the social media era where we have all these filters and things like that, people have an unrealistic viewpoint of physical beauty and they have an unrealistic understanding that even that changes from day to day, week to week, year to year.
Mm.
And so, unfortunately, they're choosing their mates based on a moving target. I will also say that women who tend to use that as a first filter are usually women that's the most important thing.
Mm.
So if you're on an app, given that most women naturally tend to look, they want someone attractive,
Yeah,
but they
yeah.
tend to look for safety characteristics and things like that in order to determine who to be intimate with. The fact that those women are like, yeah, I'm gonna go pick me a man out here, out of these pictures. That's because their number one value is looks.
Is the looks, yeah. And
Is
these are the
looks.
men who provide no stability, no security. They're there for something different. They're not
Exactly.
there for long-term relationships. Great, Linda. This conversation was fabulous, but we
Thank
have to move
you.
to our second section, which is the quickfire round. I've got 6 quickfire questions for you.
Okay.
If you don't want to answer one of them, you can give me a skip and then we can move to the next one.
Okay. Fair
Are
enough.
you ready?
Okay.
Great. Number one, what are the top 3 strategies in 2025 to keep to understand your relationship goals as an individual?
Absolutely. Make number one realistic. Number two, holistic. And number three, having an understanding of the long term. So those are the things. Realistic
Realistic.
meaning that you're choosing a relationship across multiple seasons of your life. So create goals based on that. Holistic, which means look at every area of your life and make sure that you set your relationship goals based on that. And then talk about lifespan. It's really, really important because if you're going to be with anybody, it's usually going to be in across the course of your life, even people you break up with. It's amazing how nature brings things back full circle. So always be conscious of that. Chances are that person might come back into your life under different circumstances and you want to have
Circumstances.
good relationships.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you so much for that. What book would you recommend to our audience and why?
Other than It Takes Two to Tango, my book.
Definitely.
If I said if you only had one, I would say Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, other than my own, only because it really underscores that there's different ways that we operate and that it's important that equal does not mean same. So you can be equal and not be the same
Not
and
be
still
the
have
same.
equal respect and regard.
Got it. Got it. What's one attribute or characteristic in your mind of a
Mm,
successful relationship?
that's a tough one. I'll say loyalty.
Loyalty. Yeah.
Loyalty, which to me is a form of consistency and stability, breeds safety.
Interesting.
And
Great.
safety creates a vulnerability that relationships need.
Yeah, we did discuss that in that. Cool. What's your favorite personal relationship hack?
Ooh, dance together.
Yeah.
Um, and it really is because 93% of communication is nonverbal. The quickest way to understand how a person moves, handles leadership, handles conflict, handles obstacles is to dance with them.
Dance with them. Guys, dance with your partners. Great stuff. What's a new or a crazy uh what's a crazy relationship advice you have ever given to one of your counselors or somebody who seeked help from you?
Oh my gosh. Let him go.
Interesting.
Meaning, and that's a tough one. Meaning to give someone the space so that you can see everything. So most people think letting go meaning break up or whatever, but sometimes you just need a perspective on the relationship by letting go, meaning giving yourself the space to see the whole picture and make decisions from that.
And last but not least, what's an interesting or fun fact about you that most people don't know?
That most people don't know. I used to be a tomboy.
What? I would love to see,
Exactly.
I would love to see you
Exactly.
into one of those dresses.
Exactly. Most people are like, "What? You a tomboy?" I was like, "Yes, I used to be a tomboy." So yeah.
Great stuff, great stuff. Linda, thank you so much for joining me and sharing all this wisdom.
Thank you.
Some of the golden nuggets. I'm gonna put that into my diary and then think about them later on. If people want to get in touch with you, people want to know more about Linda Sutton, what's the best way to do it?
Absolutely. You can reach out to me on my website, which is www.lindadsutton.com, lindadsutton.com. And if anybody wants kind of some more nuggets, I have a free book on the website, which is lindadsutton.com/ebook, where you can, kind of get some understanding about the relationship dynamics through the lens of tango.
Awesome. Great. Linda, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your inspiring work you're doing with helping people with relationships. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on Relationship Labs podcast.
Likewise, thank you so much for having me, and I wish love to all of your viewers and listeners.